console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For your chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
It's 9 o'clock on television, online and on radio. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, as a man is arrested for saying Hamas are terrorists, British policing has lost the plot. Whose side are our hapless cops on? My Mark Meets guest is former Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Kazyanov, who served under Vladimir Putin for 4 years. Who will win the war in Ukraine? Is World War III still a risk? And is Vladimir Putin an evil man? In the big story, Tory clamours for a return of Boris Johnson to frontline politics are getting louder. So, do they ditch Sunak in favour of Bojo to rescue their chances at the next election? I'll be joined by arch Boris royalist Tory MP Michael Fabricant. And this is a bit special. In my Take at 10, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner is struggling to close the door on her growing council house mystery. I'll be revealing some shocking details about a potential scandal for Keir Starmer's number 2 that just won't go away. A very busy show, 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. Angela Rayner at 10, you won't want to miss it, but first the news headlines and Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here are our top stories from the GB newsroom. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of preventing a lawful and decent burial in Yorkshire. Branches of Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in Hull and East Riding remain cordoned off. That's after concern for care of the deceased was reported on Wednesday. Humberside Police says 34 bodies have now been respectfully transported to a mortuary for formal identification. A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman are being questioned. They're also suspected of fraud by false representation and fraud by abuse of position. Police say an incident at Buckingham Palace is not being treated as terror-related. Armed officers detained a man in the early hours of yesterday morning after a car crashed into the gates. He was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage, then released on bail and has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. Pro-Palestinian protesters are being warned they could be lending credence to extremists. The community's secretary is urging people to question which groups are organising the marches. Michael Gove, who's due to publish a new official definition of extremism, told the Sunday Telegraph there's no excuse for ignorance and that good-hearted demonstrators need to be aware they risk fuelling hate. London's Jewish community has braved rainy weather to demand the release of hostages being held in Gaza. They joined Jews around the world blowing shofars, traditional ram's horns, which are normally used at the holiest moments of the Jewish calendar. The last pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas was back in November, when Hamas released more than 100 hostages. It's believed that Hamas still holds around 134 people kidnapped during the October 7 terror attacks. A group of mothers are staging a hunger strike outside Parliament. The 5-day protest aims to draw attention to parents who can't afford to eat and are skipping meals to feed their children. Their list of demands include enforcing free school meals and universal credit to guarantee life's essentials. MPs are due to address this issue on Tuesday. And finally, the Princess of Wales has thanked the public for their support as the first photo of the royal was published after her abdominal surgery. The image, posted on social media to mark Mother's Day, was taken by the Prince of Wales in Windsor earlier on this week. Sitting down, Princess Catherine is surrounded by her children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. She was admitted to hospital on January 16 and left 2 weeks later following a planned operation. She's expected to return to her royal duties after Easter. Well, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Mark.
My thanks to Ray Addison. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. In my big opinion, as a man is arrested for saying that Hamas are terrorists, British policing has lost the plot. Whose side are our hapless cops on? In the big story, Tory clamours for a return of Boris Johnson to frontline politics are getting louder. Do they ditch Sunak in favour of Bojo to rescue their chances at the next election? I'll be joined by arch Boris loyalist Tory MP Michael Fabricant. My Mark Meets guest, what a booking for the show. Former Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov, who served under Vladimir Putin for 4 years. Who will win the war in Ukraine? Is World War III still a risk? And is Vladimir Putin an evil man? In my Take a 10, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner is struggling to close the door on her growing Council House mystery. I'll be revealing some shocking details about a potential scandal for Keir Starmer's number 2 that just won't go away. Meanwhile, is Rishi Sunak right to squeeze benefits to fund tax cuts for workers? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. Plus, as a former Home Office minister, I'll be asking Anne whether the police have lost control of extremism in this country. We've got tomorrow's front pages at 10:30 sharp. Tonight with 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script, and they've got proper pedigree. Former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Now, good news, the first official photo since her operation. Princess Catherine, the Princess of Wales, is pictured with her children on Mothering Sunday. We'll get reaction from a top royal insider. Plus, the most important part of the show, your emails. They come straight to my laptop, mark@gbnews.com. And of course, it is Mother's Day. So can I wish all the mums out there a very happy Mother's Day? This is me with my darling mummy, wishing her all the best. I saw her a few hours ago. We've got producer Maria with her lovely mum Liz, who I've met a few times. She listens to my podcast, The Mark Dolan Way. Well done, Liz. And my other brilliant producer, Katie, with her gorgeous mum, Kath. So what I want is pictures of your mum. If you're lucky enough to have your mum still with you in your life, send pictures of your mum, or if you've lost your mum and you want her remembered, either way, send a picture of your darling mums to me, mark@gbnews.com. That's right, mum pictures to mark@gbnews.com. This show has a golden rule, by the way, before we start. Do you know what that golden rule is? What is the golden rule of Mark Dolan Tonight? Well, if you're new to the programme, and there are lots of people who are new to the programme, we absolutely thrashed Sky News on the show last night. And why? Well, because we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Angela Rayner at 10, you won't want to miss it. A big 2 hours to come. We start with my big opinion. I love our police officers, but I'm getting sick to the back teeth of our police forces. Remember the absurdity of the pandemic with Derbyshire police flying drones over the countryside to find people out walking? An old lady arrested for sitting on a bench at the seaside drinking a coffee. People apprehended for queuing for sandwiches in farmers' markets. People being harassed in supermarkets and on trains for not wearing one of those filthy, worthless masks. The policing of a bizarre 10 p.m. curfew in pubs. It was all an utter shambles. Stupid pandemic policies which have destroyed the country, enforced by gormless cops. What about the pathetic spectacle of police officers in Wakefield, West Yorkshire, sat there at a hastily assembled press conference where local clerics berated an autistic child for accidentally scuffing a copy of the Quran? The officers sat there nodding like the Churchill dog, lending credence to what was a ridiculous kangaroo court and the enforcement of a blasphemy law by the back door. What about cops asking Insulate Britain nut jobs whether they'd like a cup of tea or a sandwich after they'd glued their hands to the motorway? Or what about cops dancing on the streets with Extinction Rebellion protesters whose only real ambition is the extinction of the British economy and our way of life? These are the same police forces that have wasted thousands of pounds on those absurd rainbow-painted cop cars and raided people's homes for hurty tweets and unkind Facebook posts. Now, the officers are doing their best. It's a national scandal that while so much focus is on doctors' and nurses' pay, our bobbies on the beat have been under-remunerated for 2 decades. If I was in charge, I would pay coppers far more. But I would also completely change the culture of policing, and heads would roll at the top. Like Sir Mark Rowley, the ineffectual Met Police chief, who has presided over those alleged peace marches which have left Jewish people in Britain afraid to leave their homes, and where hateful thugs, including those calling for an intifada, which means suicide bombers on public transport and in shops, being allowed to run amok. And if it was possible yesterday, we saw an even lower point for British policing, with an Iranian man called Niak Gorbani, now living in the UK, arrested for the great crime of waving a placard which read, "Hamas are terrorists." Now, calling Hamas terrorists is hardly a controversial view, unless, of course, you work for the BBC. Hamas are a prescribed terror outfit, according to the UK government. But hold up a sign that says that in central London and you'll have your collar felt. Now, the argument from the police is that this guy was agitating the crowd. But let me suggest that if saying that Hamas are terrorists would agitate the crowd, surely it's the crowd that you should be worried about, not this anti-Hamas protester who was manhandled and injured. Take a look again at that nasty cut on his leg. That's a serious injury there, poor bloke. Now, this guy was later de-arrested, whatever that means. Is that like when Gwyneth Paltrow and Chris Martin consciously uncoupled? Now, those numpties at the Met Police offered a mealy-mouthed statement. Here it is. They said a video has been posted on X alleging officers arrested a man for having an anti-Hamas placard. This is not accurate. He was arrested after an altercation was ongoing and officers intervened to prevent a breach of the peace. He was arrested for assault. But here we go. Are you ready for the U-turn? Officers then fully reviewed footage provided of the incident, and he was later de-arrested. The arrest was not made in relation to the placard. Sorry, I don't buy it. Either way, extremism has been allowed to proliferate on Britain's streets in the name of peaceful protest. If Jews are afraid to leave their house, the protest is not peaceful. If MPs are afraid to vote a certain way in a House of Commons division for fear of violent reprisals, which is what Sir Keir Starmer reportedly told the Speaker of the House, the protests are not peaceful. If you can project the words "from the river to the sea," which to anyone with half a brain clearly means the elimination of Israel, then these protests are not peaceful. In fact, they're so against the law that the police should be enforcing them, but they're not. And look what happened today. Take a look at this. Met police officers stop and harass a Jewish man for holding a "For Israel Against Anti-Semitism" sign. Now, why is this guy being manhandled? And why is a message against anti-Semitism upsetting those on the so-called Peace March anyway? I'll allow you to make your own conclusions. Now, we have the best police women and men in the world, but the culture and leadership of our police forces is failing British law, failing British values, and failing British democracy. The Met Police were once branded as institutionally racist. Well, now they're institutionally useless. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com, and don't forget to get me your pictures of your mothers over. It is Mother's Day, so pictures of your mum, mark at gbnews.com. Let's hear from tonight's top pundits now. Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and last but certainly not least, former Labour special advisor Paul Richards. Folks, great to have you with me in the studio. Linda, can I start with you? Your reaction to the arrest and then de-arrest of this man whose great crime was holding up a placard which said Hamas are terrorists?
Well, clearly the placard was correct. I mean, what he said, Hamas are terrorists, is correct because Hamas is defined as a terrorist group by this country. Therefore, there was nothing wrong with the placard. And the BBC got there
in the end, didn't they?
But, yes, yeah, but a lot of the FT says exactly the same as the FT.
Yeah, and Sky BBC, News, I think.
And Sky News. So I don't think we can single the BBC out.
John, we don't really worry about Sky News, do we?
We do.
No, we worry about all these things, particularly on this programme, where I don't think we have quite the same audience as the BBC.
Oh, well, hopefully not. A much smarter audience.
But so the placard was OK, but clearly what the police were worried about, because that's not the only thing, the question about the placard was it litigious? Was it, in fact, it's a written word, so was it libelous? It is not libelous. It is regarded as a correct statement, so that's not going to be a problem. The problem was that guy likely to incite racial hatred or violence, and that's why the police stopped him. They cuffed him, which means, I assume, that they then arrested him, cautioned him and took him away. Probably he was safer being taken away. The question is, why didn't they arrest some of the other people that set upon him and caused, for example, that injury? Now, why didn't that happen? I assume because they fear that if they did start arresting those people, the whole situation would explode.
Paul Richards, you're shaking your head.
It reminds me of that scene in A Few Good Men where the killer argument in the court was, well, why did you need to get Santiago off the base if he was safe? And why did that man have to be removed for his own safety if those people were not tacit or even overt supporters of Hamas? If you can hold the sign up and not be bothered by anybody, then that would be fine. But the idea that he was at some threat for making that a perfectly obvious claim, which is that Hamas is a terrorist organisation, he had to be removed for his own safety, tells you everything you need to know about the people on the demonstrations, doesn't it?
Definitely.
That's the whole point.
We can all agree there are plenty of people that have been on those marches and are on those marches who want an end to the fighting. They want children and babies to stop being murdered.
Indeed.
But the flavour of this suggests that there are a good number, more than just a small minority, on these marches who seem to be sympathetic to Hamas.
Well, Vladimir Lenin had a famous phrase, did he not, which was the idea of useful idiots. People who go along with these things because they that they think it's a sort of nice thing to be involved in. And, you know, we're all against war, aren't we? But actually you're being used by some quite nasty people. This is the point that Michael Gove is making today, to provide cover for insidious organisations that are not in tune with our values and, in fact, may even be pro-terrorist. So that's the whole point. Yeah, and it is worrying. I've been observing these demonstrations in central London. They're not nice places to be. You can't walk freely around Trafalgar Square and elsewhere. And it's happening in many of our town centres as well, actually, not just in London. And it's making these unsafe spaces.
And I had a meeting, if you like, with a very senior member of the Jewish military community, if you like, ex-military person. And I hadn't until that point realised the depth of fear that exists in the Jewish community now because of these huge marches. It's really palpable, and it's very, very worrying.
Tory MP Andrew Percy said that he feels safer in Israel than in the United Kingdom at the moment. John Sargent, the police are trying to keep the peace, but the optics of this is that they are placating the mob.
Well, yeah, no, all these points you're making are perfectly reasonable, but it's a question of what should the police do in these circumstances. These are very high controversial issues. You've got tens of thousands of people involved. The police have a duty, emphasised by the Prime Minister, to make sure that riots don't break out, that order is not broken, and that the day ends with the police being able to say there were no serious incidents. No serious, dangerous incidents in the police. Now, that is an achievement, whether you like it or not. This is not to say, oh, does that mean all the people on the march were lovely? Does that mean that there were no extremists involved? Of course, there were all sorts of people with all sorts of backgrounds, including many Jewish people taking part. So the mistake is to imagine that the police, that the individual police constable, his job is to look to make sure, is there a danger that this could turn into a riot. Not the whole thing, but in this particular area. Now, if someone is producing an anti-Hamas placard at that point, they are, frankly, being deliberately provocative.
Well,
doesn't mean so it's right or wrong.
No, wait a moment.
No, because of the nature, the context in which it's used. Of course, it's not. It's absolutely perfectly straightforward, as you say, completely truthful, not illegal, all that kind of thing.
Are you not worried about the people who are upset by the placard?
What I'm worried about is the idea that the police constable or the police generally are sitting there thinking, oh, we've got 10,000 people here taking part in demonstrations, but I think we may have to arrest all of them. You don't do that. You are a policeman saying, in this context, what should I do to make sure that there isn't a riot?
It's miraculous.
Wait a minute, and they then didn't charge the guy. He wasn't formally charged. They knew perfectly well they were taking him out of the situation. There was no question of him then being arrested formally.
Now, I also work very occasionally with a counter-terrorism expert, Metropolitan Police counter-terrorism expert, who has said to me very recently he believes that we are due another incident quite soon. I mean, he means a major incident.
Like a terror attack?
Frankly...
Does he mean a terror attack?
He does. Of course, all security experts discuss this kind of thing. Frankly, this is the fifth protest, I think. It's a miracle nothing has exploded before now.
It's also a lot of restrained people, not only those taking part in the march, but a lot of restraint generally to make sure that this highly controversial, very difficult subject involving tens of thousands of people in London. Well, if you just put all those together as ingredients, in other places, there'd be CS gas, there'd be all kinds of things.
Go to Korea.
It would go on.
Well,
thousands of people would have been arrested. We don't have that in London.
Interesting point. Is John Sargent right that actually the policing of these marches has been largely successful? Let me know your thoughts, Mark, at gbnews.com. But next up in the big story, Tory clamours for a return of Boris Johnson to frontline politics are getting louder. Do they ditch Sunak in favour of Bojo to rescue their chances at the next election? I'll be joined by arch Boris loyalist Tory MP Michael Fabricant next.
Martin Daubney, Weekdays from 3 p.m.
President versus the Prince. Wow, what a story, Jenny. And this basically could mean Donald Trump rummaging around in these allegations in Spare about Prince Harry's drug taking, and it may affect his future residency plans. And of course, lest we forget, Meghan was very outspoken of her disdain for Trump when he was voted in. Jenny, this story really gets the juices flowing.
Yes. Well, Donald Trump, I think most people would accept, is probably quite a vindictive man. And he is a law unto himself. And he's made it very clear that he regards Harry and Meghan as being completely on their own if he becomes president. Thus far, they've been somewhat, I suppose, protected by the Biden administration. There is a group, a conservative group, who are trying to force the publication of the application that Harry filled in for his visa when he moved to America. And you know, the rules and laws on drug taking are quite intense over there. And the question is, did Harry say, as he did in his book Spare, that he had taken quite a considerable number of drugs? Did he say that on his visa application? But Trump has made a lot of quite unpleasant noises saying that he'll be on his own and it could threaten his residency in the United States.
California, the public enemy number one of Donald Trump, actually make the Sussexers more popular.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Martin. I think so. You know, they will be seen as victims of Trump, and their liberal credentials will be feted and celebrated, as they are already, I suppose, in California. So they could become new heroes and heroine of modern-day politics. So we will have to wait and see. But Trump has definitely got it in for.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'll be dealing with Angela Rayner in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock and the mystery surrounding the sale of her house 9 years ago. But first, it's Mother's Day, so I'm delighted to say that I've got lots of pictures of your mums. This is Anup and Risha, gorgeous ladies that they are. This is Chris and his lovely mummy, and Esther and her darling mum too. Look at those gorgeous ladies enjoying a fabulous lunch. Brilliant stuff. We've got lots more of your mum emails to come. Also, a couple of emails. Big response to my big opinion. It looks like the police have lost control of extremism on those marches. Mark says the police have one job: to arrest anybody breaking the law, not to make politically based decisions about who to apprehend. Elaine says, so the mob rules us now. That is what John Sargent is effectively saying. And last but not least, Linda, who says, Mark, John and Linda Jubilee are right. Police want to make sure unrest does not break out. The police want to keep crowds calm. Although the guy with the placard was correct, he was aggravating the crowd that he was amongst. Thank you for that. Keep those emails coming. It's time now for the big story. And this one just won't go away, with today's Sunday papers reporting a secret plot to bring Boris Johnson back before the next election to rescue the Conservatives. One possible scenario, as reported in the Express, is that Mr Johnson could be parachuted into his former constituency of Henley prior to an expected election in November of this year. The paper report one backbencher as saying there are many in the party who don't think we have a hope in hell of winning unless Boris comes back. So whether as leader or as a campaigning backbencher, could the return of Boris Johnson save the Tories? Let's get the views now of a man who supported Boris Johnson loyally throughout his premiership, the Conservative MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Michael, great to see you. The Tories have nothing to lose. Bring back Boris.
Yeah, bring back Boris, I agree. But I'm not saying we should get rid of Rishi Sunak either. I think they could both work well together. I think they've both got different skills. You know, Rishi is very, very steady. He knows what he needs to achieve in the next few months and years. And Boris has got that pizzazz and maybe sometimes, you know, that long distance view, which others don't have. So, yeah, let's bring back Boris. But the question is, how? How do we do that?
Well, indeed, what are the logistics? Do you think he could find a safe seat before the election?
Yeah, there are a number of seats where MPs are standing down. Some, of course, are ones which are not winnable or they think they're not winnable. Others are very safe seats. I'm standing in Lichfield, though. I'm not giving mine up. But, you know, you talked about Henley, which, of course, was his former seat. There has already been a candidate selected there, and I don't know whether she would be prepared to give her seat up for Boris. But there will be other seats. There always are. Before every general election, there's always a number of people go at the very last minute. And if Boris could get one of those, if he wants to get one of those, I think it would be very good for the Conservative Party. And good for Rishi Sunak, too.
Now, Michael, you'll clearly almost certainly be returned as the Member of Parliament for Lichfield because your constituents are so happy and you're a very, very successful local MP. But should the Conservatives collapse at the next election, do you think that if Boris Johnson finds himself back in the Commons, he'd be in pole position to become leader once again?
He could be. He could be. But, of course, there are a number of others who are interested in that job, too. If they're re-elected, I'm talking about people like Penny Mordaunt, Suella Braverman. I mean, I could name a number of people.
Kemi Badenoch.
Pardon?
Kemi Badenoch.
Kemi Badenoch, absolutely. And others, too, that I think others are not even talking about at the moment.
Sorry to interrupt you, Michael. If the Tories collapsed the next election, needed a new leader, and Boris was in the Commons, would he be top of your list?
I think he would be near the top. You know, honestly, you know what? When I first decided, you know, who I was going to have to vote for, I didn't originally support Boris, but then I backed Boris when he was Prime Minister because he had the long-term view, you know, whether it was our relationship with the United States, whether it was getting us out of the European Union. And yes, by making sure that we were the first country in the world to have a vaccine program against COVID. All of that was under Boris's watch. He got the big answers right. So, yeah, he would be one of the people at the very top of my list.
OK, well, listen, let's get the views.
I don't even want to think about it. You know what? 40% of people haven't even decided yet how they're going to vote. Keir Starmer, we know that Rishi Sunak lags in popularity behind the Conservative Party, but what's not generally known is that Keir Starmer is lagging behind the Labour Party. So, you know, there's a lot of ifs, buts and ands over the next few months.
Well, stay there, Michael. Let me bring in my fantastic pundits tonight. Former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Well, a return of Boris Johnson to the House of Commons would have Labour running scared, wouldn't it, Paul Richards?
Can I just make an announcement on behalf of the entire Labour movement? Please, please, please bring back Boris Johnson. It would be the best thing ever for us. It would guarantee the next election being won by Labour. It would remind everyone of Partygate and the fact that they got rid of him because of Partygate and all of that. And it would remind everyone why they got rid of him in the first place. Bring him back, please.
OK. Listen, what do you think about this, John Sargent? Do you agree with Michael that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak could work together to win the next election?
Well, no, the problem about it is if you assume, this is a working assumption, that the Tories are going to lose, the big question after the election is who was to blame. And therefore, what you don't want to be, if you're Boris Johnson, you've got any sense, is to make sure that you're not, in fact, somehow going to take the blame for what could be a catastrophic Conservative defeat. Much better keep your powder dry. Now, Boris is, whatever else you can say about him, is a highly intelligent man. He knows a great deal about politics. He won't be stupid enough to fall for this.
OK. Linda, briefly, if you can, do you share the view that the Conservatives will suffer a crushing defeat, or do you think that Michael's right, the outcome is yet to be decided?
It's interesting what he says about the 40% being undecided, and there's no doubt that there is such a thing as shy Tories who have not voted yet. We don't know how they'll vote. But at the moment, there's a 20-point lead in the polls for Keir Starmer. That's very, very important. And actually, if you listen to Rachel Reeves and how the Labour Party have built links with the city, with financial institutions, with big business, with the corporate world, I think that kind of thing is very encouraging and very confidence-building for the public. Can I say one thing, though? I agree with Jacob Rees-Mogg. I mean, Boris is a great campaigner, so there wouldn't be any problem bringing him back for the campaign for the general election. But I can't, for example, see him being parachuted into the Henley seat. Caroline Newton, I'm sure, wants to hang on to being the next candidate there.
All right, briefly, Michael, when do you think the date of the election will be? Do you think it's likely to be November now? Where's your money?
Yeah, my money's on October or November. It was never May. More importantly, in May, we've got to get my friend Andy Street re-elected in the West Midlands. So that's what I'm concentrating on.
Michael, we'll catch up soon. Thank you so much for joining us. The MP for Lichfield, Michael Fabricant. Next up, the first official photo since her operation. Princess Catherine is pictured with her children on Mothering Sunday. We'll get reaction from a top royal insider next.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead to the new working week, it's going to remain fairly changeable across the country, but increasingly mild. So as we end the weekend, we've still got this area of low pressure in charge. It will gradually move towards the continent as we go through into Monday. But before we get there, we've still got this area of rain stretched right across the country. It will weaken as we go through the course of the night, and really it's going to leave behind quite a lot of mist, murk and cloudy weather. But under the cloud, it's not going to be a cold night by any means. Most of us staying frost-free. Coldest of the temperatures up across the very far north of Scotland. So for many, it's a bit of a grey, murky start out there on Monday morning. Some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle around, and then during the course of the day, we will see a little bit more persistent rain just coming in across the very far west of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Brightest of the weather will be down towards the southwest. So here in any brightness, we will see highs reaching around 11 or 12 degrees. Elsewhere, temperatures a little bit up on Sunday, so feeling a little bit less cold. Into Tuesday, another band of rain works its way in from the southwest. The driest and the brightest weather reserved for the far north of Scotland throughout the day. Elsewhere, increasingly cloudy and wet as the day goes on. But it will drag in some milder air, so for everyone in the south, by the middle of the week, we'll see temperatures reaching the mid-teens, but staying wet in the north.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'll be dealing with the mystery of Angela Rayner's house sale in my take at 10. You won't want to miss it. It's extraordinary stuff, but it's also Mother's Day, as we've got lovely pictures of your mums. This is Paul and his mum and two siblings in 1949. What a fine woman your mum was, Paul. How about this? Tom has sent in this photo of his lovely late mother, Maureen. Lovely Maureen. And Louise and her mum doing a charity walk. Well done, ladies. Now, a big day for royal news, with the palace sharing a fabulous photograph of Princess Catherine with her 3 children on Mother's Day. Still recovering from her abdominal procedure in hospital, the Princess of Wales is pictured looking fresh, healthy and happy, with her husband, Prince William, having taken the photograph. Let's get reaction now from a very special man, a good friend of mine. He is the ex-royal butler, Grant Harold. Grant, lovely to see you, and lovely to see that photograph of Princess Catherine looking very well with her lovely children.
Absolutely. Good evening, Mark. Thank you for having me on. It's great to see that. It was a nice surprise, actually, because there's been so much speculation, can I say, rumours, discussions about where she is, what's happening. And I think this is actually a really, it's a nice thing that they've done. I don't think it's suddenly been planned. These kind of things, I think, are planned in advance. So the fact this was taken the other week, interestingly, Catherine's the photographer. William, even my memories, I don't remember William being much of a photographer. But he's obviously decided to take the picture, and it's nicely done. It's a really nice picture. It shows her looking really healthy, happy, and hopefully this will stop some of the kind of rumours that are going around at the moment.
Well, indeed, there's some pretty nasty rumours going around, aren't there, about the state of their marriage and other conspiracy theories. So it's important that the palace put that to bed.
It is, and it's a difficult one because obviously, I've been speaking to quite a lot of people about this, as well as friends who can't understand why there's suddenly this kind of silence. And I've tried to explain that it's quite a tricky one for them to manage, because obviously they're senior members of the royal family. The country, everybody is obviously concerned about her. They want to know that she's safe, that she's well. But from their point of view, they also have to have some privacy. The one thing I remember William and Catherine is they were very protective about their privacy, even when I was there. And even though they carry out public engagements as the Prince and Princess of Wales with their family, they are quite, they're very guarded when it comes to their home life, their private life. And I can understand that, because there has to be a fine line. Otherwise, what privacy do they actually get at the end of the day?
Most definitely. Meanwhile, the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward, celebrates his 60th birthday today with a special promotion from his brother, the King. How well do you know Edward? What kind of guy is he?
Do you know, he was actually, from memory, he was one of the first royals that I ever met before I even worked for the royal family. I was working at a Scottish estate in Scotland, and he came up there with Sophie just before they got married, and they were great fun. He was absolutely great to kind of be around, down to earth, very polite. I think the thing that scares me is he would have been, I want to say he was about 35, 34 at the time. He was only a few years older than me, and to hear that he's now 60 is a little bit scary. But what a lovely picture. There's been some nice photographs of him. And doesn't he look like his mother? It's quite interesting around the eyes and things. It's quite interesting to see that photograph of him. And as you mentioned, he's always been given the honour by the King, which is nice because he gets on very well with his brother, and he is an important member of the family as a senior member of the royal family. And they do carry out a lot of engagements, both him and the Duchess of Edinburgh.
Well, definitely. He and Sophie are quite a formidable double act. Do you think he gets the recognition and the exposure that he deserves?
I'm not sure, Mark, because he's a bit more of he's a senior member of the royal family, but he is quite quiet. he's quite a kind of, when it comes to royal duty and things, he just gets on with the job. And this is what I liked about him, and I think this is what a lot of people admire about him and his wife. It's interesting because he is obviously the youngest son, but I noted that his wife became very, very, very close to his mother, the Queen, and also to his father. And did he get the recognition? Probably not, but he doesn't really look for that. He's really not like that, and that's something I admired about him. But I like to think that the Queen and Prince Philip are looking down from somewhere, kind of very proud of what he's achieved and what he's done. And, the fact he's 60, so it is quite scary, but he looks very good for 60.
Most definitely. Grant, nice to reflect on Prince Edward's birthday in your company. My thanks to former royal butler to the King, no less, Grant Harold. Coming up in my Take at 10, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner is struggling to close the door on her growing council house mystery. What's going on? I'll be revealing some shocking details about a potential scandal for Keir Starmer's number 2 that just won't go away. That's at 10. But next up, my Mark Meets guest is former Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Kasyanov. Yes, he served under Vladimir Putin for 4 years. Who's going to win the war in Ukraine? Is World War III still a risk? And is Vladimir Putin an evil man? That's next. Yes, indeed, the former Russian Prime Minister. Next. Don't go anywhere.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they committed a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off, and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay. They show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, you earn it, you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simple.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'll be dealing with Angela Rayner in no uncertain terms at 10 o'clock, and the mystery about the sale of her council house. I've got some remarkable revelations. But first, Mark Meets. And tonight, Mikhail Kasyanov, the former Prime Minister of Russia from 2000 to 2004. And Mr. Kasyanov, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. You served as Prime Minister under President Vladimir Putin. What was your opinion of him as a politician and a person during your time in office?
That was 2000, 2004, as you correctly mentioned. And that time, Putin was a completely different person. At that time, he was seen as a person devoted to democratic principles, and he promised to support all reforms my cabinet initiated, and he, to the great extent, implemented these promises, supported those reforms, a part of a couple of them just. For instance, he didn't allow me to pursue gas sector reform or administrative reform to reduce the state performance or state obligations, something like that. But in general terms, he was okay in that time. And nobody could predict that such changes would come to their mind.
Well, how has he changed since your time working together?
Oh, completely. It's a completely different person, as I said. Now just we can understand that. And that time he pretended to be a democratically devoted person, but he's a real Putin, a real KGB agent, and ruling the country. That is awful situation for my country.
Why did Vladimir Putin invade Ukraine, in your view?
I think we shall say bluntly that is impunity. He invaded in Georgia, and 3 months after that, there was so-called ceasefire plan, but nothing was implemented, and business as usual. And the United States, President Obama at that time, launched reset program, reset policy, but Putin decided that invading to neighbor countries, that's a normality for him, and that's why he just easily annexed Crimea in 2014. And even there, in that time, just reaction was not so harsh, so that as supposed to be in that time. And now just we come to this awful situation, just full-fledged or full-scale invasion in independent Ukraine, and just already considerable part of territory occupied by Putin's regime.
Mr. Kasyanov, is the West in any way responsible for Russia's actions in the region, for the invasion?
I think to a certain extent, yes. As I said, the policy of, I would say, keeping Putin satisfied with the economic projects like pipelines to continental Europe and other very profitable transactions, just the Western leaders believed that Putin would be preoccupied with this and would never create a threat for neighboring countries. But appeared to be different. Putin understood that it is allowed for him to do this. As I said, Georgia, Crimea, and then just Ukraine. If he not stopped in Ukraine, he would go further on.
Mr. Kasyanov, what do you think will be the outcome of the war in Ukraine?
Oh, I think first we should believe that Ukraine would be capable to defend its territorial integrity and sovereignty, and I believe that United States just very soon settle this problem, internal problem, and with the connection with Ukraine. I don't know why there is such a connection. I'm happy that Great Britain government just pursuing just very strong and consistent policy supporting Ukraine, as European Union did the same. But then transatlantic unity, that's the most important thing right now. We need this unity to support Ukraine, because just on the territory of Ukraine, just the West defending their, I would say, the world order, liberal world order existed after the Second World War. I think just we shouldn't allow Putin to destroy the whole structure of security, European security.
If Donald Trump re-enters the White House in November, is a peace deal with Russia more likely? Does Putin have more respect for Donald Trump?
I don't think that plays a role. That respect, that's pressure. If Putin allows to go further on, that will be his victory. we shouldn't allow this. I don't think just that President Trump, if in office again, would find the solution shortly, because we should press Putin so that he will stop this aggression. And we need consistency and predictability, but it doesn't seem that Donald Trump just on that line.
You've suggested that Vladimir Putin could possibly go beyond Ukraine if allowed. What are Vladimir Putin's future ambitions, do you think? What is his vision for the future of Russia?
I think that it's very evident that next step, southern part of Ukraine and then Moldova. That is, as he called, just it's Novorossiya, or just Russian territories, as he believes in his so-called lectures of history. He building up himself the history, and if it's allowed, and also just no, I would say, adequate response to that, then he will try to test Article 5 of NATO Charter. That is, one or another small NATO country could be a subject of such invasion, of such provocation, not necessarily invasion, but some kind of provocation.
Mr. Kasyanov, you've said that when you served under President Vladimir Putin from 2000 to 2004, he disguised the fact that he was undemocratic. He pretended to engage with elections and the democratic process. But in the end, you said he was just a true KGB-type personality. Does he have a personality disorder? Is Vladimir Putin an evil man?
We should say, as I said, now just not necessarily calling him evil, but we should. He is seen like a fanatic, blinded by his impunity. That is a very dangerous position.
So you think he's power-crazed rather than mad or evil, perhaps?
Exactly.
Was the US broadcaster Tucker Carlson right to interview him at the Kremlin?
I think I don't quite understand that to create such a platform, to give such a platform, a wide platform for a dictator, to explaining, just to have this propaganda. He didn't say anything new for those who following just Putin's speeches, but he tried to pursue this through just important US TV channel, just to voters for upcoming elections. And I think just he mostly worked for voters of Donald Trump. I don't know whether it will help Donald Trump to raise his popularity or not. I don't know, but it didn't provide just a lot of, I would say, promises or just any insights of information. Just usual propaganda.
Briefly, Mr. Kasyanov, the clock is against us. I'm very grateful for your time. We can't have much hope that those elections in Russia are going to be free and fair. But is there a chance that at some point Vladimir Putin could be removed from power?
Of course, these elections, it's not elections, that's imitation of this important institution, but it's simply a reinauguration of Mr. Putin by himself. But I don't see that there is a chance in the upcoming future. But in any case, Putin is not forever. It means just we should be prepared to change Russia again, to bring Russia back to the trajectory of building democracy.
And on that, we can agree. A privilege to have you on the show, sir. My thanks to Mikhail Kasyanov, who is the former Prime Minister of Russia from 2000 to 2004. What an extraordinary conversation that was. Your reaction, Mark, at GBNews.com. But don't forget, at 10 o'clock, I'll be dealing with Angela Rayner. She's struggling to close the door on her growing council house mystery. I'll be revealing some shocking details about a potential scandal for Keir Starmer's #2 that just won't go away. That's right, Angela Rayner in the spotlight of my take at 10, and I'm not pulling my punches. See you in 2.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead to the new working week, it's going to remain fairly changeable across the country, but increasingly mild. So as we end the weekend, we've still got this area of low pressure in charge. It will gradually move towards the continent as we go through into Monday. But before we get there, we've still got this area of rain stretched right across the country. It will weaken as we go through the course of the night, and really it's going to leave behind quite a lot of mist, murk and cloudy weather. But under the cloud, it's not going to be a cold night by any means. Most of us staying frost-free. Coldest of the temperatures up across the very far north of Scotland. So for many, it's a bit of a grey, murky start out there on Monday morning. Some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle around, and then during the course of the day, we will see a little bit more persistent rain just coming in across the very far west of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Brightest of the weather will be down towards the southwest. So here in any brightness, we will see highs reaching around 11 or 12 degrees. Elsewhere, temperatures a little bit up on Sunday, so feeling a little bit less cold. Into Tuesday, another band of rain works its way in from the southwest. The driest and the brightest weather reserved for the far north of Scotland throughout the day. Elsewhere, increasingly cloudy and wet as the day goes on. But it will drag in some milder air, so for everyone in the south, by the middle of the week, we'll see temperatures reaching the mid-teens, but staying wet in the north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We have a ton of top prizes to be won in our spring giveaway. There's a massive £12,345 in tax-free cash to spend however you like, along with £500 in shopping vouchers for your favourite store, a games console, a pizza oven and a portable Sonos smart speaker. And the best news? You could be our next big winner, just like Phil.
Whoever wins it next is going to be as happy as I was, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For your chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text prize to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner is struggling to close the door on her growing council house mystery. I'll be revealing some shocking details about a potential scandal for Keir Starmer's number 2 that just won't go away. Is Rishi Sunak right to squeeze benefits to fund tax cuts for workers? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits, former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and former Labour insider Paul Richards. So, a packed show, lots to get through. I'll be dealing with Angela Rayner in no uncertain terms in 2 minutes' time. You won't want to miss it. Extraordinary revelations. But first, the news headlines with someone that's always on the right side of the law, Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Good evening. Our top stories tonight. 3 former Conservative Home Secretaries are calling for a political consensus to tackle extremism. Dame Priti Patel, Sir Sajid Javid and Amber Rudd have signed a statement urging Labour and the Tories to work together to deal with what they're calling real threats from Islamist extremists, far-right extremists and others. It comes as Communities Secretary Michael Gove prepares to announce a new government definition of extremism. Other signatories include the former head of counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of preventing a lawful and decent burial in Yorkshire. Branches of Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in Hull and East Riding remain cordoned off. That's after concern for care of the deceased was reported to police on Wednesday. Humberside Police says 34 bodies have now been respectfully transported to a mortuary for formal identification. A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman are being questioned. They're also suspected of fraud by false representation and fraud by abuse of position. Police say an incident at Buckingham Palace is not being treated as terror-related. Armed officers detained a man in the early hours of yesterday morning after a car crashed into the gates. No members of the royal family were in residence at the time, and repairs to the gate are now underway. The man was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage, then released on bail and has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. A group of mothers are staging a hunger strike outside Parliament. The 5-day protest aims to draw attention to parents who can't afford to eat and are skipping meals in order to be able to feed their children. Their list of demands includes enforcing free school meals and universal credit to guarantee life's essentials. MPs are due to debate this issue on Tuesday. And the Princess of Wales has thanked the public for their support as the first photo of the royal was published after her abdominal surgery. The image posted on social media to mark Mother's Day was taken by the Prince of Wales in Windsor earlier on this week. Sitting down, Princess Catherine is surrounded by her children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. She was admitted to hospital on January 16th and left 2 weeks later following a planned operation. She's expected to return to her royal duties after Easter. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Right now, back to Mark.
Thanks, Ray. Welcome to a busy Mark Dolan tonight. Is Rishi Sunak right to squeeze benefits to fund tax cuts for workers? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the formidable Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction in the studio from tonight's top pundits. With me this evening, former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and former Labour Special Advisor, top Keir Starmer insider Paul Richards. Plus, they'll be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros. A packed hour. Those papers are coming. Anne Widdecombe waiting in the wings. But first, my take at 10. For such a vocal political figure, Angela Rayner has gone strangely quiet. Labour's deputy leader faces questions about profits from the sale of her council house 9 years ago. And despite her claims of innocence, she's unable to close the door on this growing mystery around her former property. The allegations against Rayner are that she may owe tax on a profit she made when selling her home in Stockport in March 2015. She insists that the house was her main residence when she sold it, which would exempt her from paying tax on the considerable £48,000 profit. Now, Rayner has denied any wrongdoing and has insisted that the home on Vicarage Road was her main residence from 2007. She paid bills, council tax, and was registered to vote at the address. But there's a twist in the tale. Neighbours of Miss Rayner have insisted that she was in fact living primarily about a mile away at a property on Lowndes Lane. Former next-door neighbour Sylvia Hampson said that Rayner lived in the terraced home in Lowndes Lane for a good 6 or 7 years, despite the Labour MP's insistence that her main home address was Vicarage Road. Now, this wily next-door neighbour told the Times newspaper the following. She said, Angela lived there as a family with her partner Mark and the 3 kids. There's no doubt she was living there all the time. Now, the police have investigated this and found no evidence of any wrongdoing, and a Labour spokesperson says that following professional advice, no capital gains tax was payable on the sale of Rayner's home. But the forthright neighbour, Sylvia Hampson, who is a very sprightly 83, is not having any of it. She went on to tell the Times, I saw her all the time, coming and going. Her mum would come and visit a lot. This was her home. Neighbour Sylvia goes on, and prepare here for some strong language, folks. She says, if she is saying she didn't live there, she is an effing liar. She definitely lived in that house. She can't say she didn't live there. I would swear on the Bible to that. Oh, dearie me. Well, I don't know if Rayner is religious. Still, if Sylvia Hampson is not telling the truth, I'm sure that Angela Rayner will sue her, won't she? Definitely, that's surely what she'll do. Rayner can't be happy with this formidable ex-neighbour. In fact, she probably thinks poor old Sylvia Hampson is scum, just like all Conservatives. Whilst the amounts involved are relatively small, any capital gains tax avoided would be in the region of £1,500. This is a question of the Deputy Prime Minister's judgment and character. Now, I happen to like and admire Angela Rayner. She's outspoken, she's compelling. I think she would probably be a better leader than Keir Starmer. But she's both an asset and a liability to the Labour cause, with her aforementioned vile language about her political opponents. And there was that very explicit reference to her own anatomy, the so-called ginger growler, when she reportedly joked with colleagues that she liked to cross her legs to distract Boris Johnson when he was at the dispatch box. Hardly becoming of a person that would like to be the Deputy Prime Minister, although I doubt Boris had any complaints. Whether she was living next door to Sylvia Hampson on Vicarage Road or not, the non-payment of a small amount of tax is a sideshow. That's not the big story. The big story is whether Angela Rayner withheld the truth. Now, the revered political columnist at the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges, has tweeted the following. It's now obvious why Angela Rayner has refused to answer questions on this. Labour's statement was just false. Ouch. And that is why we need answers. And there's more, because this flame-haired politician also faces accusations of hypocrisy, because this is a senior Labour figure who made a huge profit on the sale of a house that she'd been able to buy thanks to Margaret Thatcher's transformative right-to-buy policy. This amazing scheme that liberated the British working class, unlocked social mobility and supercharged the economy was opposed at every turn by the Labour Party. But that didn't stop the likes of Labour loyalist Rayner from taking advantage of this Tory policy years later and pocketing a tidy sum. Outrageous, therefore, that Rayner wants to review right to buy and potentially make it less profitable for others. Having personally benefited from the right to buy discount, she stands accused of pulling up the ladder on other council tenants wanting to do the same. Hypocrisy. double standards and allegedly lying about where she once lived. The Angela Rayner Council House story just won't go away. And the ginger growler herself has gone strangely quiet. Your reaction, mark at gbnews.com. Would you like answers from Labour and answers from Angela Rayner? Does this story matter? Let's hear from my top pundits. Former BBC chief political correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Jubilee, and former Labour special advisor Paul Richards. Paul, your reaction to this story, it's a big problem for Labour, isn't it?
No, it's nonsense on stilts. If you look at the timeline, it was when she was a private individual, and all the authorities say she's got no case to answer. And luckily, Mark, we do not base British law on the gossip of our neighbours. Otherwise, a lot of us will be in quite a lot of trouble.
Well, this is a neighbour who said she would swear on the Bible that Angela Rayner lived at that property in Lowndes Road, at Lowndes Lane for years. Why would this 83-year-old neighbour lie?
I've absolutely no idea, but it's immaterial to this. HMRC and the police and all the authorities, including parliamentary authorities, said no case to answer. And the question might be, why is she being attacked? It's because she's effective, it's because she's not typical of the political class, she reaches people for Labour that perhaps Keir Starmer can't, and they need to take her down, if those that are opposed to her. So she's a target, but I mean, this is just nonsense, honestly.
Look at that quote, though, John Sargent. I saw her all the time coming and going. Her mum would come and visit a lot. This was her home. And how about this? If she is saying she didn't live there, she's an effing liar, John Sargent. This is strong language. Why would an 83-year-old pensioner lie about Angela Rayner, who would like to be the Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, we don't know what the neighbour's doing, apart from, frankly, not being the nicest and kindest neighbour you'd want to live next to.
You're telling the truth as she sees it, John Sargent.
No, but just because you think you're telling the truth doesn't mean to say you have to shout about your ex-neighbour. It doesn't necessarily follow that you have to do this. And the other thing is that, of course, it's up to the authorities, it's up to the Inland Revenue, it's up to all the various official bodies to say, did she behave correctly? Now, on that basis, if you say that she didn't behave correctly and they're not bringing charges against her, you can yourself be open to libel. This is not the House of Commons. You haven't got parliamentary privilege. If you open up these accusations without a very firm legal basis, you've got to be careful.
John Sargent, perhaps HMRC should have a sit-down and a cup of tea with Sylvia Hampson.
Sure, no, they're open to that. They can open up these investigations. They can reopen them. So can the police. Everyone else can. All those avenues are possible. I think in a way, the crux of the political question is much stronger, which is that if she was against right to buy, wasn't she being hypocritical if she took advantage of that scheme? Now, that seems to me a perfectly reasonable political objection. If she says that the scheme should be reviewed, is she saying that people like her shouldn't be allowed to gain in the way that she gained? Because she's not disputing that she gained.
OK, I mean, Linda Jubilee, this story, we'll come to hypocrisy in a moment, but this story is not going away. Are you in Team Sylvia or Team Angela?
I couldn't possibly be in Team Sylvia. I mean, just because Sylvia, the 83-year-old neighbour, says this must be true because I think it, doesn't make it
She lived next door to her for 6 years.
Doesn't matter. Really doesn't matter. I mean, for example, where is Angela Rayner on the electoral roll? That's very relevant, and that's a matter of record. We can all go and check that. Sylvia Hampson has said she will swear on a stack of Bibles she was effing living next door or whatever. She has a version of events. She has an opinion, but can you prove it with the documents, with the evidence? That's what I think. Now, if you think about Angela Rayner, am I on Team Angela Rayner? No, I'm not. I think that was a mark of hypocrisy, what she did. I think to benefit from a policy that you are now rowing back from so severely is awful for people. That's what I'm more interested in.
Right.
The other stuff, even Greater Manchester Police said that they are not interested in going forward with an inquiry.
Well,
Sylvia or no Sylvia.
That's because Greater Manchester Police haven't met Sylvia.
No.
Have you
She's
met
83.
Sylvia?
She's a sprightly 83. Listen, what about that point made by Linda Jubilee there? Alleged hypocrisy regarding Angela Rayner. She pockets £48,500 from selling her council house, but wants to reduce profits for others.
No, I think it's a very strong, this is a strong political argument to have. It is like Labour MPs who are against private schools sending their own kids to private schools. So when that happens, as it did famously with Diane Abbott, of course it should be pointed out. People should say, look, what do you think of the result?
Paul?
Bear in mind, with all these cases that come up where people have very strong feelings, we are approaching a general election.
Well, that's the key point, John, isn't it? It's an election. It's an election year.
Coming. If people in Angela Rayner's constituency don't like her for whatever reason, including these arguments that you've put, well, let them vote accordingly.
Paul Richards, is Angela Rayner a hypocrite? Is she pulling up the ladder for others that would like to sell their council
Well, not
house?
really, because what's the alternative? Just not being allowed to sell her own house. I mean, she didn't buy it from the council. That policy was 20 years ago. This is, like John says, an election year. A lot of mud is going to be slung. They're going to try and get all kinds of things on all kinds of political leaders, and we just have to take this as part of the sort of pre-election nonsense, which is what it is.
Paul, do you rate Angela Rayner?
I think she's fabulous, and I think she is such a non-typical politician because she's come from a very different background. She has industrial language. She looks fabulous, and I think she reaches parts of the public that the sort of mainstream politicians struggle with.
Very briefly, Linda, is she Labour's Boris Johnson?
Yeah, I can see what you're going with there, Mark. She's a character. She's an individual. She resonates with the public. She's a great campaigner. When she's out on the road, she resonates and engages far more than Keir Starmer does, actually. More than Rachel Reeves, who's not so bad. But at the end of the day, there is a large element of hypocrisy here, and it doesn't matter whether it's an election year or not, because hypocrisy is hypocrisy.
Well, folks, it's up to you. Are you in Team Sylvia, the 83-year-old neighbour, Sylvia Hampson, or Team Angela Rayner? Let me know. And by the way, no more mum pictures, because we've had hundreds, and your mums are so gorgeous. Tomorrow I'm going to reply to everybody on email, but we've got a surplus of lovely mum pictures which are coming for Mother's Day, but thank you for sending them in. But let me know your thoughts. Are you Team Angela or Team Sylvia? Lots more to come. But next up, is Rishi Sunak right to squeeze benefits to pay for tax cuts for working Brits? We'll debate that with the formidable Anne Widdecombe next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
For decades, Britain has been dealing with immigration, but for one part of the UK, it is a relatively new experience. GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has this report.
At the end of April 2023, Ireland's immigration was up by 31%. And over a decade, Northern Ireland's has doubled, with South Belfast being the most diverse. Tracy Kelly is a DUP Belfast City Councillor who deals with the issues in this area on a daily basis.
We have working class communities like Sandy Row, like the Donegal Pass, who are blending in with others who are coming here to work and live and mix. But there is also an issue when there's too many people who can't get housed. That seems to be the main issue that I deal with. When people in their own community who've been born and reared here have to move away because there's a lack of housing.
Takura Makoni represents the African community of Northern Ireland.
I would presume mostly 99% of asylum seekers or migrants and refugees coming to this part of the world would have very little knowledge about the internal dynamics in Northern Ireland. So you find out it's almost like you're thrown in the deep water. To have the cognizance to say, here, I need to pick up that I'm living on a peace line and these guys don't like those guys and maybe these guys can tolerate me and those ones won't. You don't have any idea of that. It'll take you up to 10 years to get a real sense of that because, remember, you're focused on trying to rebuild your life.
To avoid further tensions, should government be looking at the placement of those refugees and migrants?
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Angela Rayner faces questions about the sale of her council house 9 years ago. Her neighbour has rather explosively said that she's a liar and that she lived at a different address. How about this from Graham, who says, I'm in Team Sylvia. Enough of Labour's hypocrisy. It started with Blair and it continues. Martin says, who really gives a stuff on the issue of Rayner's house sale? And Alan says, hi, Mark, I'm definitely in Team Sylvia. She's a remarkable lady, the next-door neighbour, 83, who's called Angela Rayner potentially a liar. Of course, Angela Rayner strenuously denies any such allegations. Now, let me tell you, I'm very excited about this because we've got more Mother's Day pictures. So let's fire those in. Now, this is Mark and his lovely mum, Pamela, on a flight somewhere gorgeous, just as gorgeous as Pamela. Love that picture. And we've got Ray and Caroline. That's Ray Addison and his lovely mum. And isn't his mum very rock and roll? And we've got Viv and her mum, two very fine ladies. Happy Mother's Day to lovely mum. Brilliant stuff. OK, now listen, we've got a developing story. I've got to tell you that the team are just getting the picture ready because that photograph of the Princess of Wales, Princess Catherine, with her 3 children. Well, we're hearing here at GB News that that photograph has been doctored. That's right, we're hearing that it's been gone through Photoshop, essentially it's been fiddled with. It is not the original photograph. Now, we were told it was taken by Prince William, Prince of Wales, of course. We were told it was a happy family shot for Mother's Day, but there is some question mark now about the veracity of that image. But we are hearing at GB News that that photograph has been through something like Photoshop. The image has been doctored. What does that mean? What will that do to the rumour mill about what's happening in the royal family, about Catherine's health, about the state of her marriage to the Prince of Wales? It will only get tongues wagging, and I'll get full reaction from my top pundits. The official Kate Mother's Day photograph has been doctored, is what we're hearing. Reaction at 10:30. OK, folks, lots more to get through. And, of course, I've got to tell you, we've maxed out with all our pictures of our lovely mums now. So let's get on to more big stories of the day. And Rishi Sunak is preparing a new benefits squeeze to fund his ambition to abolish national insurance contributions for workers by the end of the next Parliament. In an interview with the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister said he was planning to curb the growing welfare bill to fund further tax cuts. Senior Treasury sources claim there will be another fiscal event, possibly a mini-budget, as soon as September before polling day. So is Rishi Sunak right to squeeze the welfare budget to fund tax cuts for working Brits? Let's get the views of tonight's newsmaker, former government minister and television personality Anne Widdecombe. Anne, is the political establishment finally waking up to the fact that Britain lives beyond its means?
Well, rather belatedly, I think they're waking up to the fact that we need tax cuts. That tax cuts do fund growth, as I've said on this programme many times. And I think rather belatedly, the government is waking up to that. Now, we do need to reduce taxes, and we also need to reduce the welfare bill, which has been growing and growing and growing, and a lot of which goes on people being out of work. So, we do need to tackle those things, but whether you do the one in order to do the other seems to me to be a bit far-fetched, that you sort of predicate a tax cut on a welfare cut. And I don't even see that logical or possible.
And politics, as you know, is all about tough choices. How do you strike a balance between a sensible, sustainable welfare bill whilst protecting the most vulnerable in society?
Well, you've only got a certain size of cake. And the point I've been making for a long time is that if the only people who claimed benefit were those who really needed benefit, they'd be able to have a bigger share of the cake. But as it happens, we've got an awful lot of people who are perfectly capable of working who don't work. That is what successive government, even Thatcher, never got on top of the welfare dependency culture, never got on top of it, and no Prime Minister since has either. And I would actually like to see a real effort on this. I mean, even Blair talked about doing it, didn't do it.
Now, Anne, 3 former Conservative Home Secretaries are calling for a political consensus to tackle extremism. Dame Priti Patel, Sir Sajid Javid and Amber Rudd have signed a statement urging Labour and the Tories to work together to deal with what they're calling the real threats from Islamic extremists, far-right extremists and others. Do you think that the government and this move by previous Home Secretaries will be successful? Can we ever get on top of extremism in this country now?
Well, we certainly could if we had the will and if we put the resources into it. Yes, I think it is possible to do. Let me say right away what anybody with an iota of intelligence must recognise, which is you'll never be 100% successful. There will always be extremist incidents. There will always be terrorist incidents, which you didn't quite manage to prevent. But you could be a lot more successful than we are at the moment. And so I think it's quite right that we look at it. Now, it appears to me, I don't often stand up for this government, but it appears to me that the government really can't win. You know, everybody says you've got to do more to tackle extremism. And then when they do, and when Gove gets into this, everybody says, oh, hang on, you know, that's all wrong. You'll only worsen the situation. And you've got to be able to win. You've got to be able to do something.
Anne, I wish we had longer. It's a packed hour, but we'll catch up with you in a week's time. My thanks to the brilliant Anne Widdecombe, former government minister, of course, best-selling author and television personality. Lots more from Anne next week, don't worry about that. But next up, tomorrow's newspaper front pages and live reaction from my top pundits, plus they'll nominate their headline heroes and pack page zeros. So we've got more pictures of your lovely mums and the papers. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead to the new working week, it's going to remain fairly changeable across the country, but increasingly mild. So as we end the weekend, we've still got this area of low pressure in charge. It will gradually move towards the continent as we go through into Monday. But before we get there, we've still got this area of rain stretched right across the country. It will weaken as we go through the course of the night, and really it's going to leave behind quite a lot of mist, murk and cloudy weather. But under the cloud, it's not going to be a cold night by any means. Most of us staying frost-free. Coldest of the temperatures up across the very far north of Scotland. So for many, it's a bit of a grey, murky start out there on Monday morning. Some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle around, and then during the course of the day, we will see a little bit more persistent rain just coming in across the very far west of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Brightest of the weather will be down towards the southwest. So here in any brightness, we will see highs reaching around 11 or 12 degrees. Elsewhere, temperatures a little bit up on Sunday, so feeling a little bit less cold. Into Tuesday, another band of rain works its way in from the southwest. The driest and the brightest weather reserved for the far north of Scotland throughout the day. Elsewhere, increasingly cloudy and wet as the day goes on. But it will drag in some milder air, so for everyone in the south, by the middle of the week, we'll see temperatures reaching the mid-teens, but staying wet in the north.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christys Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christys Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Happy Mother's Day to all of the mums watching, and some of you are not lucky enough to still have your mums with you, but the pictures have been coming in thick and fast. So this is Woody and his mum Carol in Doncaster. What a fine figure of a man you are, Woody, and lovely, proud mum, gorgeous Carol. This is Derek and his lovely mum. Happy birthday. There you go. She's celebrating a birthday in that picture. Very fine lady, lovely, happy family, enjoying their time with mum. And Jonathan and his younger, innit? Younger generation there, young Jonathan and his gorgeous mum, who does not look like his mum. She looks like his older sister. There you go. By the way, speaking of pictures, this is the first portrait of the Princess of Wales since her operation, and it's for Mother's Day with her 3 children. But there's a story developing. Several agencies have rejected this photograph now. Multiple photo agencies, including Reuters and AP, have pulled this image of the Princess of Wales over concerns that it's been manipulated or doctored. This is potentially a massive story for the royal family, a potential scandal. We'll get to it straight after tomorrow's front pages. Well, I'll get to that story in just a moment, but how about this from the Eye? Faulty IT at Home Office hits efforts to tackle illegal immigration. The flawed Atlas system that cost the government £71 million is causing errors and delays. Does that sound familiar? Horizon, anyone? Meanwhile, The Guardian. Tory ex-Home Secretaries warn against politicising extremism. And Ramadan in Gaza. We are sitting here waiting for our fate. Independent. Anfield thriller, Liverpool and City share the spoils as Klopp has a final showdown with Guardiola. Scandal of the elderly treated like animals on hospital wards. And there is that image of Princess Catherine and her children, an image which could prove to be very controversial. Find out why in just a moment. Metro. I'm smiles better, Kate's joyous Mother's Day photo, but who took the photo? Was Kate in it? Was it doctored? Was Photoshop involved? Daily Star. We are tops for linguistics. Sacre bleu. Words boffin. English is just badly spoken French. There is no such thing as English language, and what we are speaking is badly pronounced French, says a top French boffin. Well, what is French for do one? OK, let's get full reaction now to tomorrow's papers in the company of my top pundits. I'm delighted to have with me the former BBC Chief Political Correspondent John Sargent, journalist and communications advisor Linda Dewberley, and former Labour Special Advisor Paul Richards. Listen, let's get straight to this photograph. We're going to talk about this in glowing terms, John Sargent, because this is the first public official image we have of Princess Catherine since she had her operation. The nation and the world has been on the edge of its seat about her well-being. Has she recovered? We haven't seen her. But now controversy around this image, suggestions it's been doctored, with several photo agencies, including Reuters and AP, pulling this image of the Princess of Wales over concerns it's been manipulated.
No, it is an absolutely astonishing story, and to think that this is a pretty straightforward, very welcome, normal PR operation to say, look, this is, you know, this is Mother's Day and this is, she's a famous mother and how wonderful and all the rest of it. Public totally behind this. And to be told, here's a lovely picture, yes, agree to that, and the photograph's taken by her husband, how marvellous. And suddenly we're told, just this evening, that these agencies, serious agencies, Reuters and AFP, are saying that they're concerned that it's been manipulated. Well, now, you know, I'm not an expert. I look at it, to me, it just seems OK. But then these manipulations that have occurred, you know they're getting more and more sophisticated. I don't know. But if it's true, of course, the cover-up, the fact that it's been altered, then becomes the story. It doesn't matter what the picture looks like and, oh, but she does look nice and they look nice. What's wrong with having it? Well, it's completely wrong. You can't put this forward as a family photo if it's been manipulated.
And it doesn't help, Linda Jubilee, that this photograph was released to end speculation and to stop conspiracy theories about the Wales's marriage and about her health.
Well, because when she was shown only a few days ago, say 10 days ago, on the school run, she did look dreadful and she looked very pale and she was hiding behind
glasses. Can I just say I look dreadful on the school run?
Yeah, but you know, lots of people talked about it, and I think that they made a decision. It's Mother's Day coming up. I think we're going to quell those rumours about her being down and not recovering very quickly. I think we're going to put out this photograph for Mother's Day, but to my eye, I can see that has been manipulated and photoshopped, actually, especially down the side of her face and the side of her hand. Now, most papers that publish photographs will clean up the images, but they rarely touch a royal photograph, never mind one taken by a member of the royal family and the actual heir to the throne. And I think, do you know, the other thing I think that's really strange is that I know this sounds a small point, but I'm a woman, so I'm allowed to say this. She's wearing a black top. Now, a black top is disastrous in a photograph and on air, and the reason for it is it won't show definition. But I think there's a reason why she's wearing it. She doesn't want to show definition. Face has been photoshopped, and I think all of that is understandable. But actually, when you're releasing a photograph to reassure people about a previous photograph that was taken 10 days ago, it's all a bit dodgy.
You have to wonder whether we're being taken for mugs, Paul Richards.
I think she needs to sack her PR advisors because, I mean, if this is a, doctored photo, it's pretty obvious that it is. And the fact that these major agencies are pulling it, and this now becomes a story that will last days and days and days until they release another photograph to prove that this was real.
That's it. They'll have to have a real photograph.
Yeah.
What's so surprising is that...
And that just makes it worse and worse. Everything about it is now a complete disaster.
Yeah, they're on the back foot now, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. No, there's no easy escape. There's no clever way around this.
No.
They're absolutely
no graceful exit.
Unless they can simply say, this is not true, this was not manipulated, this is a genuine photograph. And they should be saying that now and tonight if that's true.
What's so surprising is the same communications department handled the King's diagnosis of cancer supremely well. Yes. And the open letter to the public, was absolutely perfectly worded. But this has just gone from bad to worse. And I didn't really think it needed to. That's the irony.
Well, that's what's so stupid.
You could have been so straightforward.
These clever people behind the scenes, oh, what about this and how about that? You think, no, how about falling back on the truth? How about actually being truthful? That's an easy PR operation.
Paul, is that an argument for less presentation when it comes to the royal family? Let them be more real. Less PR, perhaps. Like you said, sack the PRs.
The danger has always been, shining daylight in on magic, isn't it? And that somehow this will undermine the institution. But actually, a modern monarchy, if it's going to coexist alongside a democracy, has to be transparent. Yes. They are real people. They get ill. They go to hospital. Things happen, and we need to know about that. And it's trying to cover it up in the way that you could have done 50 years ago.
I agree.
You cannot do that now.
I can't see this as having happened on the watch of Queen Elizabeth II. I don't think that this would have, for example, she wouldn't have allowed someone to put out a photograph of her that was not 100%.
Well, probably
veracious.
Not. I mean, that's probably right.
Yeah, but hang on, there is a difference between the royal family and the royal household. Some things the Queen, the late Queen, would not necessarily have seen every photograph or even seen every photograph of her. There's a very big difference. The communications department sits in the royal household, not the royal family.
But I think the other point to bear in mind is that this is such an unusual situation where the king is ill, where you've got the structures clearly altered. All the people normally around the sovereign and not with Prince William or, they're not with the Prince of Wales. I mean, that is one of the communication problems. So if there are people who would normally be, number 3 or 4 in the hierarchy, suddenly, actually, they're number 1 for acting. It's quite, you know, roles and duties are tricky, and there aren't that many experts around the royal family that you can just... And if you're not careful, as in fact Meghan and Harry found, with all their sort of appointments of people, then sacking them, to get a sort of group of loyal people who know what they're doing, who are highly experienced, that's tricky.
And it's the same in politics, isn't it? Same in number 10 if you haven't got the right people around you.
Yeah, then what happens if they say, oh, we've got a new person in and they're really good, and what have they done? Oh, well, they've just doctored this picture. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Who's going to say, don't be so stupid? Who's experienced enough
to say this is really dangerous? You see, the royal family calls itself the firm, but in fact it's not really like communications in the corporate world, which is often handled very, very strictly. It's very well organised about the principal and the advisors around them and the way it's structured. It doesn't work that way in the royal family, and that's why you get these slip-ups.
Is it more like the Vatican? Is it smoke signals?
Someone said years ago it's more like Wolf Hall. The novel.
But look, this is so blatant. If it is doctored, if and these agencies are not messing about. If they've withdrawn it because they believe
that. I mean, when we do the Dolan
PR 101, isn't it?
When we do the Dolan Christmas card, sometimes I sort of brighten it up. Maybe superimpose a smile on Mrs. Dolan's face.
As far as I know, though, you're not due to be anywhere near the throne, are you?
But never say never. I mean, I will take the role.
You're not recovering from a serious operation. And the whole
I mean, I
world
brighten
is
up when we do our Christmas card. I brighten up the picture and bring out the colours, because you know you've got this software now which allows you to just
It's the fact that Reuters,
the image.
It's the fact that Reuters and AP have withdrawn this and sent out a note saying why they're pulling this image that's so important.
And this chilling phrase, Kensington Palace, has declined to comment.
Oh dear,
is that damning?
Because
they haven't worked out their answer yet.
To say, we think this famous photograph that's now being seen by millions and millions of people around the world is being manipulated, but Kensington Palace has declined to comment.
Yeah.
Well, hurry up.
Well, you have your story there with that answer, don't you? With no comment. Surely, if it was an innocent mistake or unintentional, they'd come straight out and say
straight out and say, my son, we're very sorry.
So now the conspiracists are going to have free reign, aren't they? Now every nut out there.
Because an obvious response, Linda, would for them to say that the photograph was taken by the Prince of Wales and the publicity team used some software to enhance the image, and it was done in error. But we've not had that. I mean, can we get to this issue of William having taken the photograph? Because that was an important part of the story.
Part of the genuine, we thought, story.
Right.
And made it so moving.
And that's what made it so resonant on Mother's Day.
Private picture.
Yeah. It's a picture taken on Mother's Day by the husband of Kate. I mean, that's an incredibly important
What's the worst case scenario? What might have been going on here, Linda?
Well, I think she doesn't look as well as the photo suggests.
Right.
I think that can be the only reason. Why else would you fiddle with the photograph?
Right, yeah.
But if the photograph is to reassure you about that she's OK, you're back to sort of Soviet times, aren't you?
Yes.
You're back to people being wiped out of photographs. You're back... You know, you're
it's very dangerous. Very dangerous.
A crazy world of manipulation where it's all mirrors, where you can't trust anything they do.
Yes.
Blimey, I mean, this will take a long, long time. If this is true and it's as it's been suggested, right? So we're basing everything on the assumption that these agencies know what they're talking about and they're correct and it's serious. Otherwise, they wouldn't have killed it. They wouldn't have manipulated.
Paul Richards, to say that this PR image has backfired is an understatement.
It's a disaster. Even now, it's a disaster in the first few minutes of this breaking. But
we're just coming to terms with this.
Roll into tomorrow.
Yeah.
All those editors who've put this picture on their front pages, we've just been looking at. They're taking.
That's their reputation.
So now the day two is sorry we were had.
Yes.
And on it rolls into the week.
I can think of a certain couple in Cupertino, California, who'll be chuckling at this story.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. The smiles will be fairly obvious. Yeah.
But at least Harry and Meghan do know how to do PR. Don't
they? Meghan knows how to manipulate all of her photographs and has done for many years. She regards that as normal behaviour.
Doing it well, doing it properly.
She does it well.
She's a pro. Listen, more on this extraordinary story, the fallout from the news that this new photograph of Princess Kate, Charlotte, Louis and George has been doctored. A memo from the Associated Press posted on X ordered staff not to continue running the story or the image following accusations of manipulation. Well, it is not just the Associated Press, because now it's Reuters as well, pulling an image of the Princess of Wales from circulation over concerns of its veracity. Where do the palace go from here? More reaction to that, plus my pundits will be nominating their headline heroes and back page zeros of the day, and more front pages and more pictures of your gorgeous mums on Mother's Day.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism, and parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine. Like, that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should
But
be...
also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I
to,
think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think it's almost you can't. They can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
That at the time.
Yeah, that's good.
Welcome back, and I'm delighted to say that for Mother's Day you've been sending in pictures of your very special, very wonderful mums. This is Anna, and isn't she a glamorous mum? Look at that, with a well-deserved glass of wine. That was Anna. Oh, by the way, sorry, I should correct that. That was Anna and Karen's late mother, Margaret. So that was Margaret you just saw there. So God bless you, Margaret, in loving memory. Thank you for sending that in, Anna and Karen. This is Jay and his late grandma as well. We miss those grannies so much. And look, he's got the loud hailer so he can be properly heard. Much missed grandmother. And Frida, who is Lynn's mum. Hello, Frida. Lovely lady. Oh, it's so nice to see your mums. The mums we've still got and the mums we've lost. OK, a few more front pages. Let's have a look at the Telegraph now. And photo from Palace was doctored, say agencies. Princess of Wales' Mothering Sunday image of family recalled over editing concerns. Also, police take bodies from funeral home after 2 people arrested. And extremists must be named, says the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove. Times now. Blasphemy demos are growing in radicalism. Britain faces an alarming rise in intimidation and threats of violence against those perceived to have insulted Islam. Protests condemning acts of alleged blasphemy have become more frequent and radicalised, according to independent research commissioned by the government's counter-extremism czar. Starmer to govern with a gang of four. So Keir Starmer will radically overhaul the way Britain is governed by upending the traditional system of cabinet government if Labour wins the election. Under plans being developed by his team, mission boards will focus on the party's pledges to improve economic growth and reform public services. Well, who could argue with that? OK, we'll look back to this extraordinary developing story. And when you get a chance, Josh, if you could flash up that offending image now. This is a photograph of the Princess of Wales with her 3 children, but multiple photo agencies, including Reuters and AP, have now pulled this image from circulation over concerns it's been manipulated. The picture in question was released on Sunday morning to celebrate Mother's Day. It shows Kate surrounded by her and Prince William's 3 children, George, Charlotte and Louis. The initial image was circulated to I suppose, deal with speculation about her health and about the status of the royal family. Well, let's get more reaction from John Sargent, Linda Jubilee and Paul Richards. And another concern I would have, Paul Richards, is the doctoring of this image. What does it tell us about the culture of Buckingham Palace and the palace authorities?
Well, I think it's a broader issue, actually, in politics and in public life, of this idea of deep fakes and the fact that the manipulation of imagery, including video and audio, which just creates an alternative reality that people believe. I remember getting in the back of a cab in Liverpool, somebody saying, why is your leader attacking Liverpool? And they'd seen a deep fake of Keir Starmer saying this, which, of course, he hadn't said.
Right.
And this man believed it, and probably did dozens of others too. And it's just a start, you know. It's going to get ever more sophisticated. To the point where we're just not going to know what's real and what isn't.
And especially in a pre-election period of time, I think this could all get a great deal worse. But these are in fact the 4 of the world's biggest picture agencies have withdrawn these shots. And I think they have to do it because there's nothing you can... Warren Buffett once said it takes 25 years to build a reputation, only 5 minutes to lose it. And frankly, if you break the golden rule, like you put out an image that has been manipulated, your reputation is blown. And that's a very, very serious thing for those picture agencies. They acted quickly because they had to. Their reputations were at stake.
Yes, indeed. And, of course, there's so much mystery surrounding the health and well-being of Princess Catherine. I'd rather not talk about it because, you know, she had a major operation and we just want her to recover. And I wasn't one of those people saying, you know, where is Kate? We deserve to know. Right. However...
Yeah, but this is different.
This is different because now it makes you wonder about her health with valid concerns. And also, there was the advert for tickets for the Trooping of the Colour, which was advertised online a couple of weeks ago. And it was Princess Catherine was going to be present. And then that advert was pulled. So the plot thickens, Linda Jubilee.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to divide this into 2 aspects. I agree with you that I'm not particularly interested in finding out the fine details of her health, particularly if it's about something that's quite personal. I don't want to know. But this is really important. To manipulate pictures like this, I'd like to know exactly what had happened. I'd like to know how it happened and why it happened. And those things are a matter of public interest.
I think also there's this question of, you know, the King, in a way, started this by saying about his own illness, I believe in transparency. People should know about prostate cancer and so on. They should know about other things. No, I didn't have cancer because of that. He then got caught because people then said, we want to know more detail now. So they were on a sliding slope from the very beginning, which we talked about on these programmes, that, you know, once you say, I'm going to be transparent, OK, you've got to be transparent. You've then got to be transparent for all members of the family whenever it's serious. And, of course, the old arguments were, don't, because you'll then be led into further questions.
Nevertheless...
So the Downing Street used to have this phrase, we're not giving you a running commentary. So all that was because the politicians in their own way had been through this whole cycle of how much should you talk about? Should we name the Downing Street sources? What do we do about it? This went on for years and years and years. No, we must be more transparent. And then when you are transparent, don't be surprised if you get caught. Not in such a dramatic way as this, but caught in small ways.
But
We want to know more.
What I find extraordinary is that the communications department at Buckingham Palace made a strategic decision to deliver information about the Prince of Wales in a certain way. And he himself said he wanted openness about it to encourage other men to come forward.
OK.
So they acted that way and they handled it perfectly.
Well,
this
listen,
is a mess.
You've handled this developing story perfectly too. The clock is against us. I wish we had longer. There's the front page of the Mirror, and oh dear, they've been caught hook, line and sinker. Thank you, first official pick after op. Fleet Street will be furious. Thank you to the brilliant John Sargent, Linda Jubilee and Paul Richards. You for your company. I am back on Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead to the new working week, it's going to remain fairly changeable across the country, but increasingly mild. So as we end the weekend, we've still got this area of low pressure in charge. It will gradually move towards the continent as we go through into Monday. But before we get there, we've still got this area of rain stretched right across the country. It will weaken as we go through the course of the night, and really it's going to leave behind quite a lot of mist, murk and cloudy weather. But under the cloud, it's not going to be a cold night by any means. Most of us staying frost-free. Coldest of the temperatures up across the very far north of Scotland. So for many, it's a bit of a grey, murky start out there on Monday morning. Some bits and pieces of light rain and drizzle around, and then during the course of the day, we will see a little bit more persistent rain just coming in across the very far west of Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. Brightest of the weather will be down towards the southwest. So here in any brightness, we will see highs reaching around 11 or 12 degrees. Elsewhere, temperatures a little bit up on Sunday, so feeling a little bit less cold. Into Tuesday, another band of rain works its way in from the southwest. The driest and the brightest weather reserved for the far north of Scotland throughout the day. Elsewhere, increasingly cloudy and wet as the day goes on. But it will drag in some milder air, so for everyone in the south, by the middle of the week, we'll see temperatures reaching the mid-teens, but staying wet in the north.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB.
We're springing into spring and giving you the chance to win the seasonal essentials. First, there's an incredible £12,345 in tax-free cash to be won, plus a spring shopping spree with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. And finally, a garden gadget package to enjoy, including a handheld games console, a portable smart speaker and a pizza oven. For your chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
Patrick Christys Tonight. Weekdays from 9 p.m.
Well, to cut a very long story short, I was the chaplain in a school, and a pupil asked me to preach on how come they were told they had to accept the LGBT stuff in a Christian school. I thought that was a fair question. So I said, ultimately, no, you don't have to accept anybody else's ideas. You make up your own minds. And so on topics like the marriage being between a man and a woman, biological sex being real, gender identity not making perfect sense, therefore can't be entirely true. I said, you know, you may adopt the church's position on that and respect the people you disagree with, but you make up your own mind. For which, as you say, I was reported to Prevent, the anti-terror watchdog, secular safeguarding authorities, the Teaching Regulation Agency, Disclosure and Barring Service.
all of whom eventually cleared me, but I lost my job at the school, and that's why there's legal action ongoing.
It's an incredibly powerful sermon, to be fair. What do you make of Justin Welby in his current role? I've obviously rattled off quite a few things there. I mean, you've had personal experience of feeling quite abandoned. What's your view on his position?
Well, he's doing a very difficult job, in fairness to him. My personal view is perhaps he's not doing the best job of it. I'll be diplomatic about it. In a sense, I'm on the wrong side of things as far as he's concerned, I guess. Not a word of support, not a whisper from anyone in the Church of England's hierarchy for someone simply saying, you may accept the Church of England's own teaching. And I can't quite see how he can square that in his own head, but he would have to answer to that himself, I guess.
I mean, the irony is that, though this is obviously through no fault of your own, the Church of England has recently baptised people who have gone on to not just be referred to prevent, but actually commit acts of terrorism. Meanwhile, you were referred to prevent for essentially teaching.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Headliners is up next, but first, more on that developing story. A photo released of the Princess of Wales has come under major scrutiny following claims that it may have been manipulated. The image, posted on social media to mark Mother's Day, was said to have been taken by the Prince of Wales in Windsor earlier this week. It shows Princess Catherine surrounded by her children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. 4 major news agencies have now decided to withdraw it from their platforms, with AP saying, on closer inspection, it appears that the source has manipulated the image. The Princess of Wales was admitted to hospital on January 16th and left 2 weeks later following a planned operation. More on that story as we get it here first on GB News. Well, staying with the royals, and police say an incident at Buckingham Palace is not being treated as terror-related. Armed officers detained a man in the early hours of yesterday morning after a car crashed into the gates. No members of the royal family were in residence at the time, and repairs to the gate are now underway. The man was arrested on suspicion of criminal damage, then released on bail, and has been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. 2 people have been arrested on suspicion of preventing a lawful and decent burial in Yorkshire. Branches of Legacy Independent Funeral Directors in Hull and East Riding remain cordoned off. That's after concern for care of the deceased was reported to police on Wednesday. Humberside Police says that 34 bodies have now been transported to a mortuary for formal identification. A 46-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman are being questioned. They're also suspected of fraud by false representation and fraud by abuse of position. 3 former Conservative Home Secretaries are calling for a political consensus to tackle extremism. Dame Priti Patel, Sir Sajid Javid and Amber Rudd have signed a statement urging Labour and the Conservatives to work together to deal with what they're calling the real threats from Islamic extremists, far-right extremists and others. It comes as Communities Secretary Michael Gove prepares to announce a new government definition of extremism. Other signatories include the former head of counter-terrorism policing, Neil Basu. A group of mothers are staging a hunger strike outside Parliament. The 5-day protest aims to draw attention to parents who can't afford to eat and are therefore skipping meals so that they can afford to feed their children. Their list of demands includes enforcing free school meals and universal credit to guarantee life's essentials. MPs are due to address the issue on Tuesday.